Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Trump probably never expected this moment to unfold the way it did. On one unforgettable night, two of America's best-known entertainers used his own public comments as the centerpiece of their comedy and commentary, and millions watched the story play out. It all began with a single magazine cover. After Time unveiled its latest issue, many assumed the focus would be on a major diplomatic achievement that had just placed Trump in the global spotlight. Instead, his attention shifted almost entirely to the photograph itself. Rather than celebrating the accomplishment, he spent hours criticizing the image, pointing out the lighting, the shadows, the camera angle, and nearly every visual detail except the event the cover was meant to highlight. Then, just before dawn, he shared a late-night social media post saying the article about him was acceptable, but calling the picture one of the worst photos ever taken of him. That unexpected reaction handed Jimmy Kimmel the perfect setup. When Kimmel stepped onto the stage the following evening with that very magazine in his hands, the audience instantly recognized what was about to happen, and the room was filled with anticipation before he even delivered his first joke.
Brought me back to 8 years old, where I used to sit in my room. Trump is toast.
I like that one.
Trump is toast. Yeah, man.
And so you just kind of digest the news of the day.
It's an affirmation.
I'm glad some good is coming out of this stuff. This is Robert Mueller.
Robert Mueller putting the squeeze on the president. Just to relieve the stress. You know what I mean? It's a stress reliever.
And here we have...
That's Space Force.
That's the Space Force, yeah.
That's the beginning of Space Force.
Kimmel wasted no time building on the moment. He joked about how unusual it seemed that someone who had just been associated with a significant ceasefire announcement in the Middle East appeared far more interested in criticizing a magazine photo than reflecting on the achievement itself. The audience immediately burst into laughter, and Kimmel leaned into the routine even further. He playfully described how Trump appeared to search for hidden messages in the cover, joking that he had mistaken what was simply part of the magazine's logo for a royal crown floating above his head. Kimmel quipped that it took a unique kind of imagination to look at an ordinary letter and see a symbol of royalty. The crowd loved every second because the humor reached beyond the magazine itself. It became a lighthearted commentary on someone who often seemed deeply focused on personal image, while much bigger events unfolded around him. From there, Kimmel rolled through a series of other public complaints Trump had made over recent months, mentioning everything from a grocery store logo and windmills to celebrities he criticized and awards he never received. Each example added another layer to the running joke, creating the picture of a public figure who always seemed to have a new grievance. What truly made the segment resonate, however, was not just the comedy. It was the fact that these jokes arrived after weeks of highly publicized events that had already captured the nation's attention, giving the entire monologue even greater impact.
Also happens to be Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day, which is a federal holiday, although with the government shutdown, every day now is a federal holiday. We're on day 13 with no end in sight. A majority of Americans blame Republicans for the shutdown. Republican leaders are still trying to blame Democrats for the shutdown, even though they control the House, the Senate, and the White House. It would be like Trump blaming January 6th on Joe Biden, which he actually did do yesterday.
The story became even more interesting when it circled back to events from only a few weeks earlier. After returning to television following a temporary absence, Jimmy Kimmel found himself at the center of another public exchange. Trump quickly took to social media, dismissing Kimmel's abilities and suggesting his departure had been the result of poor ratings. Yet the viewing figures painted a very different picture. Kimmel's return attracted more than 6 million viewers, making it one of the strongest performances of his career. Rather than responding with anger or launching into a lengthy defense, Kimmel handled it with the calm confidence that has become one of his trademarks. Looking straight into the camera, he asked the audience if they had ever heard of someone supposedly being removed because of ratings in the middle of an ordinary week. The simple question landed perfectly because it allowed viewers to draw their own conclusions instead of forcing the joke. Even many people who normally supported Trump acknowledged that the line was sharp and well delivered. At the same time, conversations surrounding Kimmel's absence suggested there was far more to the story than television ratings alone, with many believing larger political pressures had become part of the discussion, making the entire situation much more complicated than the public back and forth suggested.
Hatred of immigrants, contempt for the truth, greed, and the abuse of power. We are fighting those same evils today. And we need to be clear, shamelessness is not and will never be a superpower. It is the mark of a villain. Kidnapping children is not what great nations do. Almost half of America at this moment believes there is a sinister deep state diabolically plotting to what? Give them health care? We in America are misinformed.
Those questions only grew louder after comments from the head of the federal broadcasting regulator sparked widespread debate. The official warned that television networks could face consequences if they failed to address Kimmel's program, a statement that many critics viewed as an inappropriate attempt by a government figure to pressure private media organizations. Observers argued that the language sounded unusually forceful for a regulator and raised concerns about where the line should be drawn between public criticism and official influence. Soon afterward, White House representatives tried to ease the controversy by suggesting the remarks had not been meant seriously. However, that explanation quickly became harder to defend when Trump later posted online that ratings had been the real reason Kimmel had been pushed aside, creating an entirely different narrative from the one offered by his own team. Moments like these have always played directly into Kimmel's style of comedy. Rather than inventing stories, he often builds his monologues around statements people have already made, allowing public comments, social media posts, and obvious contradictions to become the punchline. Every new boast, denial, or heated reaction gives him fresh material, and because Trump shares his thoughts so frequently online, Kimmel rarely has to search very hard for his next joke. While those nightly monologues continued drawing attention, another well-known entertainer had been expressing many of the same concerns for years through an entirely different creative outlet, using artwork instead of comedy to make his point.
Hard to understand what's going on. I mean, I really, one minute you feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to be, now the landslide's going to start. And then there'll be some other weaselly little, sidestep they do or whatever it is. And, this administration is a rabid dog, and it's turning us upside down. And as far as I'm concerned, it's as obvious as the nose on your.
Jim Carrey, celebrated for decades as one of Hollywood's most recognizable comedians, gradually expanded his creative focus into political artwork that reflected his personal views on the events unfolding around him. During an appearance on Kimmel's show several years earlier, he arrived carrying a collection of paintings featuring bold and exaggerated portrayals of Trump and other political figures. Carrey explained that painting had become his way of preserving a historical record of a turbulent period, allowing emotions and observations to live on through art long after headlines faded. Some pieces were intentionally unsettling, while others mixed satire with humor, but each invited viewers to stop and think instead of simply looking away. He often spoke about his belief that meaningful art should challenge people rather than provide comfort, encouraging deeper reflection on the issues shaping society. Carrey also expressed concern that political rhetoric was encouraging Americans to see one another as permanently divided, when he believed far more united ground still existed beneath the conflict. His criticism was direct, describing Trump as someone whose behavior reminded him of a bully who continues pushing boundaries until someone finally refuses to back down. Using familiar examples from everyday life, he compared that dynamic to the child who repeatedly takes another student's lunch or embarrasses classmates simply because no one stops the behavior. Even when critics argued that his paintings went too far, Carrey remained firm in his position, saying that staying silent in the face of conduct he considered harmful would only allow it to continue unchecked.
Donald Trump is guilty of 34 felony charges. On the first charge of falsifying business records.
Guilty.
On the second charge.
Guilty.
On the third charge.
Guilty.
On the next 31 charges.
Guilty. 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 Guilty.
That's right. Guilty. Like that. Poor Donald Trump, 7 weeks of sleep farting, all down the drain, all for nothing. You do have to hand it to him. No president has ever been convicted more than Donald Trump. How long before he starts bragging about this?
That same willingness to speak through performance reached television when Carrey portrayed Joe Biden opposite another actor playing Trump in a memorable presidential debate sketch. The scene captured the confusion, interruptions, and unpredictable exchanges that had become familiar to audiences during real campaign debates. One character struggled to keep the discussion focused, while the other repeatedly took the conversation in unexpected directions, creating a performance that felt less like exaggerated comedy and more like a reflection of events viewers had already watched unfold themselves. Then another major turning point arrived, when breaking news reported that Trump had been found guilty on multiple felony charges. Late-night writers rushed to rewrite their shows only minutes before airtime, as the atmosphere shifted almost instantly. When Kimmel walked onto the stage that evening, he held the court verdict instead of his usual cue cards, recognizing the significance of the moment before delivering his jokes. The audience answered with waves of laughter and applause, creating the sense that comedy had become a way for many people to process an unusually intense news cycle. Outside the courtroom, Trump strongly criticized the outcome, describing the proceedings as unfair and arguing that the ultimate judgment would come from voters rather than the legal system. By that point, however, the public conversation had taken on a life of its own. Kimmel transformed the news into widely shared comedy, while Carrey had already spent years exploring similar themes through his artwork. Their approaches were completely different, yet both centered on the same broader idea, that public actions and public statements often shape a person's legacy more powerfully than any attempt to control the narrative, leaving audiences to form their own opinions from the events they witnessed.